What do you say, everybody? Welcome to Alabama Football on YouTube. He's Trey Yanity. I'm Mick Gillispie. Wednesday night, Bama basketball coming up, and we're going to try to entertain you a little bit before that basketball game tips off. We're going to talk a lot of football like we always do. Some more staff movement for Alabama to get into today, wondering how that's going to affect the team on the field. We'll talk NFL Combine, a list of the players who, for the last couple of days, have been going through the pre-training stuff, like the stepping on the scales, I guess, or the whatever they do before they actually get you out there to run around. And then we'll talk about Alabama basketball before we get out of here. And look, do us all a favor here. We're trying to get to over 100,000 subscribers because we want to have as many subscribers on our channel as Alabama fans in Bryant-Denny Stadium. So like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, share, and we appreciate you being here today. All right, Trey, let's get into this, man. Good to see you again, though. How you been?
I've been good, Mick. I know it's still Mardi Gras season. I know you're enjoying it down there. So good to see you as well. I hope you had a fun day of festivities this past week. I know it's kind of the big one. So please continue to enjoy that. Good to see you guys in our comment section again tonight as well. Like Mick said, we're trying to do something big here, guys. We're trying to get to that 100,000 mark. So keep telling your friends, whoever, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, help us grow. Yeah, man, there's still a lot to talk about this week. We had a show on Monday. We've been doing this the last few weeks and get to meet again here on Wednesday because there's just so much to get into. Like you said, the Combine kind of starting today for some guys. This is kind of just the beginning, the earliest stages. We see guys, interview and do their exams and whatnot, but, still waiting to get into it. Basketball, like you said, another huge week coming up here before the tournament. And, a lot of other sports going on. Softball still undefeated. Mm-hmm. Baseball with a tough week so far. But, just excited to be back. How's Mardi Gras? How's everything going for you?
Well, look, Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday, the same thing, right? One's in French, one's in English, but it took place Tuesday. We had all the parades. It was fantastic. Went out with the family, had a great time. So now it's Ash Wednesday. And, Lent has started. And so I'm trying to give up carbs for Lent. I don't know how this is going to go for me. It could be 40 days and 40 nights of misery, but you do it. And, you know what? I'm kind of excited about it on one hand. And then on the other hand, I'm going, okay, how's this thing going to work out? How am I going to feel in a week or 2 weeks? But yeah, Mardi Gras was great, man. I mean, they do it. It started in Mobile and they do it really well down here. I love the parades and, people that are watching from Louisiana, they do it well there. It's like a lot of places across the country, even into Texas now, kind of celebrate Mardi Gras and have a good time with it. But all right, well, let's talk Bama, Trey, and talking about New Orleans. There's a transition in there. Dr. Matt Ray, part of that two-headed team that Alabama had trying to keep the players healthy with David Ballou. David Ballou staying, tweeting Roll Tide. He's not leaving. The New Orleans Saints, though, are going to take Matt Ray. So they were trying to get both guys, I guess, and then they get one. What do you think about the director of sports and science heading to the NFL and to the New Orleans Saints?
Hey, I got to wish him luck, and I'm wishing you luck with your Lent challenge there with carbohydrates. I think this year I'm going to be giving up baseball. Major League is complying with me, so that's going well so far to this point. But, this is a tough loss for Alabama. This is a guy that's hasn't been here for too long, got here kind of when COVID was kicking up back in March of 2020, but has really made an impact. And, we didn't really know what this was going to look like with two different guys, David Ballou, Matt Ray, kind of being a double-headed monster with strength conditioning and the health side of things as well. But for Matt Ray, it was about finding ways to build guys up. He had a famous quote kind of when he got here, talking about getting in the weight room and making it a positive place to build guys up, not a grind factory to tear guys down. So I think, just the energy, if nothing else, is what's going to be missed the most. And this dude knew his stuff. I mean, this guy is Dr. Matt Ray for a reason. How many injuries did we see over the last few years? There's some. It's a game of football, but we saw a decrease. We saw these guys look healthier. Certain guys get quicker, make adjustments in season, and you can credit a lot of that to Matt Ray. I think the New Orleans Saints made a great hire here, and he had spent some time at a lot of different programs. He had spent time with the NFL Combine, actually, kind of helping them out in that department as well. So, he's familiar with the NFL, familiar with really high-level football, obviously, being at Alabama, but this is a tough loss. David Ballou, from what we know, will stick it out and, will kind of just lead this thing by himself now, which I think is going to be relatively similar to what we saw. And, it's a good thing. David Ballou is a brilliant mind just the same. You'd love to have them both, but like I said, you got to wish him luck at the next level. And, hope Alabama is able to stay healthy and, keep this consistency with the strength and conditioning.
There's been a big debate amongst a lot of my friends, like off the air, when we talk about these guys, because obviously Alabama had Scott Cochran for years. Yeah. The guy that came over to look like Opie Taylor when Nick Saban took over. It was Scott Cochran, who was like the last guy from the original staff before he went to Georgia before last season. And Alabama had a bunch of injuries towards the end of Scott Cochran's run at Alabama. And he left Alabama, and I think he's like a special teams coach now. I guess that's what he's doing. But he took a lot of the heat for all of those injuries. And then last year, the combination of Dr. Matt Ray and Dr. David Ballou, they were a great team, right? Is David Ballou a doctor? I don't even know. But look,
he's not.
He's not. Okay, well, so I'm going to take that doctor away from him. But what I will say is this: is that Alabama had a rash of injuries last year. Is it his fault? I don't know. But when you look at what Alabama dealt with last year, it was a season that was riddled with injuries throughout the roster, including the entire secondary and both star receivers and the entire running back room. And, it's like the list goes on and on, like one of their best pass rushers, right? How much is, Dr. Matt Ray and David Ballou at fault for that? I don't know. I don't know if they are at all. I don't even know if Scott Cochran was. But you know what? Scott took a big hit because of all those injuries. Remember, they had the year that Alabama didn't have any linebackers. You remember that? And then they ended up winning the national championship anyway. But, just typical Nick Saban, even this year with all the injuries. So, but two totally different styles. These guys are using sports science and, the newest technology. And Scott Cochran's the guy that's screaming at you when you're doing when you're doing bench presses and pushing you in the fourth quarter program.
Yeah, no, and he was, maybe more of the face even. You saw him on the Jumbotron headed into the fourth quarter. Scott Cochran was big for this program for a lot of different reasons, but, he didn't bring that science element that Matt Ray did. And you saw some big injuries this season, a couple important injuries last season too. But you think about those, they're all knee injuries. They're all hard contact injuries to the receivers, at least. Jameson Williams, and Jalen Waddle last season, John Metchi at the end of this year as well. Knee tears and stuff like that are almost unpreventable for these guys. I think it's about the soft contact injuries, the injuries that are no contact at all. We saw that go down a bit. And overall, I think that David Ballou is still maybe more responsible when it comes to that stuff. He's in the weight room with them a little bit more. Matt Ray focused a little bit more on the science and the diet of everything. So I think, ultimately David Ballou's now going to have to step up and probably gain some new some knowledge on some of that stuff on the scientific side of things. But overall, I love what they're doing so far because they're just coming at it with a different mentality. You hear the Chad Ochocinco versus science all the time. I don't know if you followed that at all, but a big kind of argument in the sports world is, your diet and how much that matters. Yeah, you hear some guys eat McDonald's before every game, and some guys, have their keto diet every single day of the week. I don't think there's a perfect answer to this, but I think these guys do a great job of personalizing these weight plans, figuring out what's important for these guys, what's going to get them in the right spot to succeed, and making sure their diets are up to standard as well. There's not a single Alabama athlete right now that's eating poorly with the new facilities and everything else. And good for Matt Ray. This could be a reason he took the job at Alabama. The second he got here, there was a whole new sports science and dietitian program facility over there at Malmore too. So, I think just sticking to that game plan, keeping the science in mind, but making it personal for these guys is something David Ballou does well, something you hope to see continue on now that Matt Ray is headed back to the NFL.
And look, the grass isn't necessarily greener on the other side, right? I mean, Alabama's facilities are as good as most teams in the NFL, which is really crazy to think about.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, after the renovations, they probably weren't even necessary, but you have this standard for everything. And these guys are the faces of strength and conditioning, the faces of diet, but there's such a big staff of people that look after these diets and make sure that these players are in the right position to succeed. These guys are the head coach of that department, of course, but there's a lot of staff that are still at Alabama that are going to remain at Alabama, including David Ballou, that understand Matt Ray's idea and what it takes to continue with that consistency. You hope to see some of these injuries go down. I don't know if there's an answer to building up stronger knees, but that's kind of been the biggest issue for Alabama these last few years, even in the secondary at times. Overall, I think, just making sure you're at the forefront, like Alabama is always going to be, of diet, of facility, of, even strength and conditioning coordinator like they've been these last few years. You're going to be all right. Injuries are going to happen. It's a physical game, but we saw Bryce Young come in here and look like a completely different player with all kinds of strength that he didn't have when he got here. And, guys like that, I think, are really going to benefit from being around David Ballou. I think they benefited from Matt Ray, but you just got to turn the page now. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. But when Alabama got both of those guys from Indiana had never really been on the football map. And then all of a sudden, they started to become a team to reckon with. Now, they don't have the caliber of football player that Alabama does, but they were really good, and one of the things that people started to figure out, the secret to their success, the tandem of Matt Ray and David Ballou, and then, now that tandem's going to be broken up. But Alabama keeps Ballou, Ray going to the NFL, and we'll see how that shakes out moving forward. Hey, guys, as you hang out with us here, watching Alabama football on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Share with your friends. That's a great way of saying Roll Tide. We appreciate you being here on a Wednesday night as Trey Yanity and me, Mick Gillispie, talk Alabama football. All right, let's change gears here, switch a little bit, stay with football, but let's talk about the NFL Combine. Thursday, Thursday's when you really start to get guys on the field, right? Tuesday and Wednesday, you do a lot of the stuff to kind of prepare everyone for that. Alabama has a bunch of guys going, 2 players in particular that I want us to get into with Brian Robinson and Slade Bolden, 2 guys who have a lot to gain from the Combine, or maybe even a lot to lose, depending on how things go. But let's talk about what happens at the Combine and, what Tuesday and Wednesday have been in Indianapolis.
Yeah, these first couple days are very routine. And this year is nothing but routine. I say routine there, but, it's kind of the early stages where there is no drills, there's no workouts. And we mentioned it on our last week's show, but in this year's Combine, they're going to be doing workouts and drills on the same day. They're going to split it up by position. I think it's 3 positions a day once they start, to get into that stuff. But this is a different kind of Combine. And you're seeing certain guys sit out. Evan Neal is not going to be going through workouts or, doing any of the drills on field. He is going to be part of the interview session. But, yesterday is big because we start to get an idea of what the teams are thinking, what these GMs, what these head coaches are thinking. And I saw an interesting article, actually. I know we want to talk about Brian Robinson here, and Slade Bolden and some of these other guys as well. But before we do that, I got to talk about a guy that's already in the NFL. We could see maybe get some nice pieces surrounded. Mac Jones, the quarterback of the Patriots, of course, the former Alabama Crimson Tide quarterback, was a guy that when he was drafted, we thought, we'll see what happens. This is a guy that could have a high level of success or maybe not at all. We didn't really know. And this is a guy that's proved people wrong throughout his career, of course, but he had enough success from year number 1 that we're hearing from Tuesday. Bill Belichick, that front office, wants to build around Mac Jones. They want to find maybe an offensive lineman or a receiver or certain pieces to make him more successful. So that was really good news for Alabama fans to kind of start yesterday on Tuesday. And then, today they get into the interviews and all that stuff. We don't hear too much from that. You can find that stuff, on NFL's website, on YouTube. The Combine does great coverage there, but this is really just the feeler out part of this Combine. These last 2 days, you learn the interests of these teams, and we don't really know how interested they are in maybe a Slade Bolden or Brian Robinson, but we know the kind of players that they're looking for, and that lends you to make some assumptions about which Alabama guys are going to be taken.
All right, well, let's talk about Brian Robinson Jr. He's a player to me that has a lot of heart. He's a very hard worker, but he doesn't have – there's a lot of things he doesn't have. Explosiveness. There's really nothing about his game that pops out NFL style, like speed or elusiveness or, the ability to really catch the ball out of the backfield. He can do all those things, but not NFL caliber. I look at him and see him as a guy that blocks exceptionally well, that you can hand the football off. Maybe, he's a possession guy because he doesn't fumble the ball. And, in the right system, maybe he's a guy who could sneak in there and find a home, right? Or am I wrong? Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe he's going to go to the NFL and be the next Walter Payton. I just don't see it.
Yeah, this is a guy that I go back and forth on, and love Brian Robinson to death. Love the fact that he stuck it out at Alabama, waited for his opportunity and got it. And I think doing that puts him in position to at least have a chance here. He's playing for a team that was in the playoff, playing for a team in the national title as a starting running back. And like you said, this is kind of a sleepy guy. This isn't a dude that makes the highlight reel every time or makes big headlines, but being in position to get noticed at Alabama, I think was a big deal for Brian Robinson. Being in position to go to the Senior Bowl, to get invited to the Combine. You maybe don't do that if you transfer somewhere else. So, nod to him for doing that. I think leading up to this process, he's done everything correctly. And, it's going to be interesting to see these next few days. Tomorrow, I'm not sure if it's going to be running backs on the first day of drills or workouts, but, whenever we do get to see him, kind of how these teams react to him. Because I think that pro day is maybe more important for all of these guys this year. You're a little bit more comfortable. You're in a smaller setting, but the Combine is where teams make your first impression. First impressions are huge in anything in life, but especially when teams are deciding if they want to give you a few $100,000 or not. So I think for Brian Robinson, finding a way to be that niche guy, finding a way to kind of separate your skill set and say, well, hey, I'm not a Nick Chubb or even a Josh Jacobs or one of these guys that's going to blow you away with my skill set, but I'm going to be a guy that's consistent, that is a really good role player, that blocks well, that could be a goal line guy even. And I think, this week is going to be big to kind of set the tone for that. Haven't heard too much about Brian Robinson over these first couple days, how teams feel about him, or really even which teams are super interested in running backs. But, thankfully for Brian Robinson, running backs are tending to get taken in bunches later in the draft. We're not seeing running backs go in the first round, second round like they used to. And for Brian Robinson, he wasn't going to be a first or second round guy. So it's not like he's going to have to sit there in anticipation for a few days. I think we could see him go maybe early fifth round, late fifth round. He could slide to the final round. He may not get drafted at all. So we'll see kind of how this week shakes out for him in pro day. But, like I said, I think up to this point, Brian Robinson has checked every box and put himself in position as best he can.
Yeah, look, I think he's going to get drafted, and I got my fingers crossed for him. And I got my fingers crossed that he gets drafted by the right team, because I would love nothing more than to see Brian Robinson go to the NFL and make a mark. Even with the doubts that I have with his game, it's not that I don't appreciate what he brings to a team. It's just that, there's some shortcomings there compared to what it takes to be a superstar in the NFL, but that doesn't mean you couldn't make a good career. Let's talk Slade Bolden. We got into Slade Bolden on Monday. We're going to talk about him again today. NFL Combine. I just see him as a huge underdog. At Alabama, he did a lot of things, but he didn't really do anything fantastic. He was the third receiver on the team this year. He couldn't get on the field last year as a receiver a whole lot. I mean, sometimes, but he was just kind of a guy, not an NFL guy, but just a guy, He made some plays this year. He's important, but nothing about his game ever said to me, this guy is a star. This guy is a difference maker. This guy is one of the best in the world. And I guess that's something that he's dealt with like his entire football career, right? Although he was Louisiana Mr. Football. Big step here. I don't think he's going to get drafted. And I think he'll be on a practice squad and then probably coach somewhere is my gut feeling. But with that said, that's what the NFL Combine's for, because there's teams that are looking for someone, and maybe he gets into a system, or maybe he proves everyone like me wrong.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that is where he's going to make his money if he does, is getting into a system that's perfect for Slade Bolden. And those systems are out there. I mean, shoot, he could go rejoin Mac Jones, but you said it, Slade Bolden wasn't a superstar. He was a guy at Alabama. And I think in the NFL, that's all he has to be. But in the NFL, and I don't want to harp on this because I don't think it was as bad as people made it out to be, but in the NFL, you can't drop the ball. You just cannot drop the football. And we saw a few drops this year. If that didn't happen if he was just the consistent guy. He didn't have to be a superstar, and he doesn't have to do that at the next level, but he has to catch the football.
Yeah.
Teams aren't going to pay 4 receivers max contracts. He could probably find a role. Teams can pay him cheap, and that could be a perfect setup for Slade Bolden and the organization that decides they want to take a chance on him. But you have to catch the football. Other than that, I think he's done everything he can, like Brian Robinson. He's been consistent. He's been a guy that you can rely on in the flat. He's a guy that you can check it down to, or even set up your offense on first down. Set it on Monday. He's not your deep ball guy. You're probably not going to run him over the middle too often, or try to do anything too flashy. But he's a guy that is consistent. If he doesn't drop the football, he can make money in the NFL. Probably find a nice role. Never be a superstar. Never get paid superstar money. But you're in the NFL, and I think ultimately that is all he needs. He was Louisiana Player of the Year, but he's still been an underdog his entire career. We're going to see it in drills, in practice tomorrow at the combine. I think we're going to see that chip on his shoulder, and he's really going to be one of the guys that gets after it, gives that max energy throughout this whole process because he has to. And I think in a year like this too, with Chris Olave, with David Bell, with some of these receivers at the top, you might see 3-4 guys go in the first round, and teams have to settle later on. He could fit into a perfect slot, maybe even go under slot, and teams will be comfortable with that. I think he will too, regardless of the dollar sign amount. He just wants to find a contract, and that could easily be an opportunity this draft.
Yeah, I just wonder what was going through his head. I mean, why not come back to Alabama and try to build on his resume? I mean, he was the 3rd best receiver on Alabama this year, and maybe, you could say he was the 4th or 5th. I mean, look, I'll give him 3rd because some of the other guys are younger, but then you say, okay, well, you're the 3rd best on Alabama's team. Where do you rank up around the rest of the SEC? And then all of a sudden you go from being 3rd to, maybe in the late 20s, right? Or later than that. I mean, really, you go through each roster and look at guys. There's a ton of guys that are better than him, at least played better in college. So, and then add in all the conferences, all the teams.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean,
this is crazy. I mean, like, this may be a mistake where he could have come back and played college, could have made money with the NILs. But for whatever reason, he wants to go to the NFL. All right, let's talk about one of the guys that was a receiver at Alabama that is going to be drafted high and is going to make a lot of money, and that's Jameson Williams, the transfer from Ohio State that came in. He's going to be at the combine, but he's not going to play because he's still injured. But still, he's a guy that Alabama has that is going to make some money.
Oh, 100%. And, this is really reminiscent of, I guess, last season, even with Jamar Chase, with Jalen Waddle, with some of those early receivers. There was big time names. Some of them were healthy. Some of them weren't. Jameson Williams this year is going to be one of the guys that isn't healthy. So it's going to be really interesting to see where Chris Olave goes. I think he's going to be the first receiver taken, where David Bell ends up. And if Jameson Williams gets taken before any of those guys, because we talk about Brian Robinson and Slade Bolden. They're looking at a pretty specific dollar range, slot range, somewhere 4th round to 6th round. The money really, increases and has all kinds of variance once you get higher up in the draft. As as I'm sure many of our listeners and viewers know, once you go from pick number 5 to pick number 8, that could be $500,000 potentially, or even more than that. So, for Jameson Williams, finding a way to make yourself valuable, make yourself sellable for one of these teams while you're the guy that's injured is going to be huge. Because David Bell, Chris Olave, some of these guys that weren't hurt this year, probably going to be battling for that first receiver taken spot, pick number 5, pick number 6. And maybe we'll see a run like we did last year. Maybe we'll see the first receiver taken and then 2 right after that or something like that. And they all get paid similar money, but going to be really, really interesting to watch what these teams think, after seeing a guy like Jalen Waddle come back from injury, get taken in the top 10, and then have a whole lot of success in the NFL. Same with Jamar Chase. I mean, he missed his entire final season of college football, got taken with a lottery pick, and, obviously went on and had one of the best receiving seasons in rookie history. So I think for Jameson Williams, these teams aren't going to be scared, but he may not be the first, second, third receiver taken in this draft just because of that injury.
You think that still puts him in the first round?
I do. I mean, he's just so fast. And, in the NFL right now, that's where a lot of these teams are making their money. Look at Tyreek Hill, look at Cooper Kupp, some of these guys. It's speed, it's separation. And, for as much value as route running and size has, speed ultimately is what wins in the NFL. I could see a team, maybe even like the Kansas City Chiefs, taking him late first round to try to add to that receiver room. Or a team that could be at the top that has an elite quarterback that they just want a guy to run out in space because he is going to be raw. We saw that this season. At times, he didn't look like an NFL receiver just because he's got really raw ability, but that speed is there. That is going to get him drafted high up. I think late first round at the worst for Jameson Williams.
How about John Metchi, another guy that was injured, both guys against Georgia? Where do you think Metchi is going to be drafted, and is he someone that we'll see in Indianapolis?
This is a really, really weird player to talk about right now because he, like Jameson Williams, was injured, but he didn't have that great season, and he wasn't injured for quite the same amount of time there, but he is going to be injured for the combine. Pro day, he's not going to be, himself, and he didn't have the monster season that we maybe expected. Jameson Williams, while he got hurt, was a Blitnikoff finalist, so you take that. With John Metchi, I could see him sliding to maybe the second round. People know what he's capable of. He was part of that ride out gang, with Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy and Devontae Smith, Waddle, of course, all those guys. So, people know that he is a legit receiver. He is NFL ready once he gets healthy, but with the injury and kind of a lackluster season, I could easily see him sliding to the second round.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think he's going to be maybe even further down than the second round.
Could be.
But let's hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some other guys. Who do you want to get into that you expect to see Thursday running around in Indianapolis?
Jalen Armour-Davis is one guy I'm really watching closely this week because, he didn't have quite the hype that some of these other guys did. He wasn't even a name like Christian Harris, who's also going to be a fun guy to follow this week at the Combine. Jalen Armour-Davis is going to, kind of have to make a little bit more of a name for himself this week. He's got the talents. At times, he was the best cornerback on this team this past season, but, I don't know if the rest of the country knows that because Josh Jobe was on the other side, and then Kool-Aid McKinstry came in and kind of took over the show there too. For Jalen Armour-Davis, this is a big week. Like I said, Christian Harris, going to be kind of fun to see where he ends up. I think at this point, he's in pretty high regards for a lot of these teams. And we're seeing linebackers taken earlier nowadays. Let me look around the rest of this list here. Evan Neal, like we said, just doing the interviews. So, I guess we'll kind of follow that as best we can. Christopher Allen got an invite. Don't really know his status. Phil Mathis, too. We saw him at the Senior Bowl. Going to be another guy that has already made his money. He will be taken high up, but, can maybe even gain 10, 15 slots this week as well. So all these guys, I think, are really fun because it's not like last year. You don't have the Mac Jones, the Najee Harris, the Devontae Smith, the guaranteed top money guys. You have a couple, but it's not quite the depth, which makes it more interesting because there's that parity. We don't really know where these guys are going to end up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I agree with you, man. I mean, I think that's what's interesting about this year is last year you're looking and you're going, okay, can Alabama possibly have 7 or 8 guys drafted in the first round? Evan Neal is going to be the first Alabama player taken. He could be the first pick in the draft. And if a team takes Evan Neal, they're putting themselves in position to have a star left tackle for years. I mean, this guy just has this Jonathan Ogden type of look to him, to me, the longtime Raven, like just a guy who's going to be in the NFL for a long time and is smart and is physically gifted, and you want to build your team around a player like that. So if I'm Jacksonville, I'm probably going to figure out a way to get him. But who knows? Maybe I think first couple picks, he's going to be one of them. And then after that, I mean, where do you look? I mean, you wonder, Jameson Williams with the injury, I think he could have gone, middle first round. Is that going to affect him at all? And then it's a lot of these guys who you're kind of looking at going, okay, the Brian Robinson, Slade Bolden. It's going to be a really interesting draft because we don't have an idea of where everyone's going to end up. We think we know, but it's not like last year where that Surtain's getting drafted. And that's going to be in the first round. Someone's going to put a lockdown corner on their team and get out of the way, right? It was the Broncos. And you knew that Mac Jones was going to be drafted. We figured the Patriots, but, of course, the 49ers made the mistake of overlooking him, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's a Pro Bowler, right? We knew that Najee was going to get drafted, and all he did was, 1,000 yards plus rushing in his rookie year, right? We knew Waddle was going to be drafted, and he set the Dolphins record for receivers catching the ball in a season, right? It's like, like you go down the line, and it was just how many of these guys are going to go this year. It isn't the same thing. The stars on Alabama's team were, underclassmen that weren't draft eligible besides Evan Neal, and Jamison Williams kind of put himself in that mix. So I'm looking forward to this year's draft.
It's going to be a lot of fun. And, as we kind of get closer to it, it's going to be a little bit more obvious where these guys or, where these teams want to take certain guys. But like you said, this is truly parity this year. Really, really excited to get into it a little bit here. And for Evan Neal too, if he's not taken at number one, who decides to make that pick? Because, he could maybe have a slide there with some of the teams lining up behind him. So just going to be fun to follow from top to bottom. And we're going to, continue to cover this as best we can. And when Pro Day comes, we'll see what the access looks like with COVID and everything else. But, we're going to be here for you guys to break it all down. So just keep tuning in. It's getting into it now. The Senior Bowl feels like just the appetizer. We're starting to get to the salad, soup, getting into the main portions of the meal now.
We're going to cover this thing throughout the draft, so make sure you hang out with us here talking Alabama football on YouTube. Trey Yanity and Mick Gillispie. Share, like, subscribe, be part of our channel as we try to add as many of you as would fit in Bryant-Denny Stadium, as our friend Kyle has told us on many occasions. We're over 75,000, and we love you guys for making this channel so popular. All right, let's switch gears here. Let's talk a little bit of hoops with basketball starting to wind down. Alabama plays at home, their final home game tonight. It's coming up here shortly. They'll take on Texas A&M, a defensive team, the Aggies. Alabama trying to finish strong here. They've been tough at home this season, and I know they had the loss to Auburn. We all hated that, but the rest of the season at home has been great. I mean, they beat Baylor, they beat Houston. They've had some awesome games. This is going to be another tough one for them as they finish up their home slate, and some guys that we'll never see in Coleman Coliseum again.
Yeah, this is, it's crazy to think about how quickly this season went on. And, for the three guys that are moving on, congratulations to them for an incredible career. I mean, this has been a complete turnaround since, I guess, 2019, if you want to call it that. And it's no knock on Avery Johnson, what he was able to do, but we've seen this group really come together and, make a brand for Alabama basketball. So credit to this class, like last year's class and the few classes to follow, because they've been incredible over these last couple seasons. But you got to finish. I mean, this is where it gets down to the nitty gritty. And thankfully for Alabama, you're playing some of your best basketball you have all season. You've won, I think the record was 6-3 in February, with all three losses coming to Kentucky and Auburn. So, you're playing well against opponents you're supposed to handle your business against, which is something we did not see in January or the end of December. So they're making adjustments. This team, we've talked about it all year long, is capable of beating anybody in the country. But tonight's matchup is really interesting because it is a super defensive Texas A&M team. And, for Alabama, they've scored 75, 80, 90 points throughout the entire season. So finding ways to put the ball in the basket, not going on these 3.5 minute scoring droughts that we've seen countless times throughout the season is going to be big tonight. But at this point, just finding a way to keep positive energy, confidence going into Tampa Bay is the biggest thing, because you've guaranteed yourself a bid for the NCAA tournament. You're probably going to be a relatively high seed, but what do you do to have that confidence factor when you're playing in the SEC tournament, playing in the NCAA tournament? Last year for Alabama, they were a high seed. I think it was a 3 seed, might have even been a 2 when it was all said and done. But, their first round matchup was Iona. That's a very hard first round matchup. What are you going to do to put yourself in position to get the right matchups, to be a UCLA that, could go run the table and play a team like Alabama in the Elite Eight? I think that this team is capable of making that kind of run. Tonight, we're gonna see how they handle a tough defense. South Carolina's defense is incredibly gritty. They did a great job on Saturday. They controlled the pace in that game. They let up a couple runs, but they kept it contained and they answered with runs of their own. Just do that again tonight. Do that in Tampa Bay, and this team's going to be all right. They're not SEC regular season champs. That one goes to the Plains, but there's a chance for redemption coming up real soon here. So just go finish out the regular season at home tonight. Go down to LSU, get a win, and then find a way to do what you can in Tampa.
So would you say this is it, right? It's it for Quinterly, Shackelford, and Davidson? Are those the three that we're done with? I mean, they're done with us. They're moving on to the NBA. I know that Davidson came in with aspirations of being a one and done, right? Nothing about his game tells me that he's ready to be a star in the NBA, but he's got awesome ability. Obviously, Shackelford and Quinterly have been Alabama's two best players.
Oh, they've been unbelievable. And James Rojas is the third there. And he's been, kind of a sleepy, big fifth man, sixth man, seventh, whatever you want to call it. Big part of this backcourt over the last couple of seasons when he's been healthy. He had to miss a good deal of time last year. Missed a few games to start out this season, but just having that depth in the backcourt when you can't turn to Bediako, you can't turn to Gary, can't turn to Gurley. You have another guy in James Rojas who's kind of that backbone there. For the other two, this is it. And for both of them, in their own unique ways, they've made such an impact on Alabama basketball. Jaden Shackelford to be one of the first guys to come in and, have to change systems and learn under Nate Oates and kind of step into that John Petty role this year. And for Javon Quinterly being one of the first really big gets for Nate Oates. Quinterly was a McDonald's All-American. He did start his career out at Villanova and, didn't really like it there. And that was something that I think we were all worried about when he decided to transfer to Alabama. What's the kid like? He spent barely a season at Villanova, and, we didn't really hear good things about him when he was coming into the program. For Nate Oates to find a way to, teach Javon Quinterly a little bit of discipline to really hone in on his skills and figure out a way to put him in a successful position has been incredible to watch, not just for Quinterly, but for a lot of the guys that have been in this program, but for these seniors, or even for the guys that may not be here next year, like J.D. Davison, their impact is, could ring out for the next decade. I mean, these guys could be, the Julio Jones of Alabama basketball. And, regardless of what they do in the NBA, I think a lot of these guys are going to have a chance at success there. We've seen it with Herb Jones already, Joshua Primo. Nate Oates is building NBA-style players. That is a huge recruiting tool, I think, that, he's continuing to develop. For these three guys, really going to be fun to see where they end up, how they do at the next level. But, just congratulations on a great career. Unbelievable runs for all three of these guys.
Right. And so we don't know yet about J.D. Davidson is what I'm saying. Like we
don't.
We don't know if he's going to go or not. Hopefully he comes back and then makes himself the lottery pick that he can definitely be. But Alabama could lose those three guys in him. So it could be four guys total.
Mm-hmm. Which, I could see J.D. Davidson easily coming back for another season. He was a small town dude out of Lottahatchee. And he had the hype, he was a 5-star, everything else. But I think at times certain NBA teams probably are a little bit weary about a dude that turns it over that much and a dude that, at times just doesn't make the right passes. It's not even about the turnovers when he gets his pocket picked. It's about some of the decisions that he makes. You have to have that ability in the NBA. He's got all of this, the skills and tools he could ever need, the jumping abilities. I think as a natural passer, he has it as well. Incredible lane driver. He's got it all, but, we're just not seeing that smart J.D. Davison quite yet. And I think another year could really serve him well.
Well, Trey, here we go. We got to get out of the way for Alabama men's basketball. But before we do it, anything else that you want to get into that I didn't bring up?
Just keep tuning in, guys. This is, this isn't quite football season, but there's still a lot of football going on. And, I know we're a football channel. We dabble into basketball, but there's so much other stuff going on right now. Gymnastics is finishing up their home schedule this Friday. Softball, baseball, all of this is kicking up. Swimming and diving just got a big win yesterday. Tennis, everything is going on right now. So go support these guys just the same. I know we talk football. We try to keep it football here, and we're going to continue to do that on our channel, but it's a spring. So, I got to encourage you guys to go get out and support them as well. But that's all I got this week. I hope it's been an incredible Mardi Gras festivities, type of week. I hope that your Lent season is off to a good start as well. But, man, excited to get back to it next week.
Yeah, 40 days, man. 40 days.
And
without
nights.
Carbs. I'm going to miss them. Hey, I'm not going to miss you guys because I'm going to talk to you again on Monday. And so is Trey. We'll be back with Monday Night Quarterback, 6 o'clock on Monday. Make sure that you join us, like and subscribe, share the channel, and we appreciate you guys being here. Don't forget that we got you covered on this channel. Any recruiting news with Andrew Bone, anything going on Alabama football with Kyle Henderson and Trey Yanity. Special thanks to Chris Daughtry behind the scenes. I'm Mick Gillispie. Hey, roll tide, everybody. We'll do it again with you real soon. So we appreciate you being here. Alabama and Texas A&M playing tonight. And hopefully the Crimson Tide finishes up that home slate with a dub.